Hi, welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to study the difference between authorized capital and paid up capital. Okay, before we dive into the difference between these two, I want to make it clear that in this video, the example that we're going to discuss is regarding a private limited company and not a public limited company. So let's say that you want to start a company, and in this company, the private limited company that we're talking about, there is a certain amount that you are ready to invest. And let's say that other than you, let's say there are 3 other members. So basically it's a private limited company consisting of 4 members, and let's say that other than you, there are these other people who are, let's say, the investors or the promoters, you can say. So these investors or promoters are going to add a certain amount as well. And initially, just remember that all 4 of you together who are going to form this private limited company are going to have that set amount in mind that you think that you are going to eventually invest in the company at the outset, at the beginning. Now, in order to understand the difference between authorized share capital and paid up share capital, let's look at an example. So in this picture, you can see that a triangle is drawn, and the first triangle is drawn in black, and then there's another triangle that is drawn in orange. And the first triangle that I'm going to talk about is the black one, that is the one that represents authorized share capital. So authorized share capital, like I've said in my earlier video in the introduction to share capital generally, I mentioned that it's the share capital basically that represents the maximum amount of shares that a company can issue, right? So authorized share capital represents the maximum amount of shares. So now just remember that this is the maximum, and that is why this is in this picture, the bigger triangle that is drawn in black, and then there's another smaller triangle that is drawn within this bigger triangle, right? I hope you have observed that by now. So what I'm trying to say is that authorized share capital is firstly always going to be greater. It's not going to be the same as paid up share capital in most situations. And just remember that paid up share capital can never ever exceed authorized share capital. All of these details are going to become very clear to you in a moment. So, coming back to our example, remember that I talked about 4 of you starting a company, a private limited company. Now let's say that you want that company to have an authorized share capital of rupees 5 lakh. So in your memorandum of association, you're going to mention that this is the authorized share capital that you want your company to have. What this simply means is that your company is going to have a maximum number of shares, which is 50,000 shares. Let's say rupees 10 for each share. So just multiply 10 by 50,000 and you get 5 lakh. So your maximum share capital is worth how much? 5 lakh rupees. So authorized share capital for your company is 5 lakh rupees, and the maximum number of shares that your company can issue ever, by the way, there's an exception to this ever, just hold on for a moment. For now, just remember that as long as you don't make any changes to the memorandum of association, then the authorized share capital for your company is going to be a maximum of 50,000 shares, right? Okay, so moving on. On the other hand, we have the smaller orange triangle which is within the black triangle, and that represents the paid up share capital. And once again, just remember that each share is worth 10 rupees. So let's say that your paid up share capital is rupees 1 lakh. So that essentially simply means that you have 10,000 shares of rupees 10 each. So 10,000 shares of rupees 10 each means that you have a paid up share capital of rupees 1 lakh. Now, I'm going to explain very quickly what these triangles represent. See, first of all, when you initially started out, like I said, there's going to be a certain amount that you have to invest at the outset, for instance, to buy the basic machinery or maybe to give the rent for the location or whatever. However, just remember that paid up share capital represents the amount of shares that you are going to issue initially when you're starting out. So paid up share capital is going to be that amount which you have issued. That is, paid up share capital is also called another name for it, and for now just presume that these two are interchangeable. Paid up share capital is also called issued capital. Why? Because this represents the shares that you have already issued. So what happens in reality is that, for instance, the four of you who start a company realize that you just have a bare minimum of 25,000 rupees that you can contribute towards that company, right? So initially you decide that, since you're just starting out, so initially what you do is you issue 2,500 shares each to each one of you, and that is basically going to be a total of 10,000 shares, and each of these 10,000 shares is going to be worth how much? Rupees 10, right? And then again, when you do the simple multiplication, you get 10,000 into 10 is equals to 1 lakh. So those 10,000 shares worth rupees 10 each, contributed by the original members, that is you, four of you who started out with the company in the first place. Those 10,000 shares represent the paid up share capital. And now if you think about it, the word paid up is kind of self-explanatory, because when we talk about paid up share capital, we're basically talking about issued share capital. And remember for now that for your purposes, initially this is an introductory course, so paid up and issued share capital can mean both one and the same thing. These terms can be used interchangeably initially. So just remember for now that paid up simply means those shares that you have already paid for. These are shares that you have issued to yourselves. So four of you, each one of you, like I said, gets 2,500 shares each, and since each share is worth how much? Rupees 10. So overall the paid up share capital is 10,000 shares into rupees 10 each is equal to 1 lakh rupees overall paid up share capital. And the reason we call it issued share capital as well is because this represents the shares that you have issued to yourselves. So basically once you do that, and by the way, there's a process of how you go about doing this. That is, you have to create a bank account in which you have to transfer the relevant amount of money that you are going to declare as your paid up share capital. So 1 lakh rupees goes into that bank account of the company. Obviously that account will not be in any of your own names, and that bank account is going to be representing who? The company, that is the artificial legal person that we have talked about in another video. Okay, so what happens once you transfer that 1 lakh rupees into the company's bank account is that you get shares issued to yourselves worth up to how much? 1 lakh rupees. And once again I repeat that this represents the paid up share capital, that is the amount of issued shares initially. On the other hand, authorized share capital, like I've said earlier, represents the maximum number of shares, right? The maximum amount, sorry. So basically, just remember, like I said, the authorized share capital was rupees 5 lakh, right? So when I said initially at the beginning of this video that paid up share capital can never exceed authorized share capital, that essentially simply meant that, for instance, in our example, we have a paid up share capital of rupees 1 lakh and an authorized share capital of rupees 5 lakh. So you can never have a paid up share capital of rupees 6 lakhs. However, it is possible to increase your paid up share capital simply by issuing more shares as and when the need arises. So for example, in this triangle, you can see that there is a pink arrow representing the inner area of the triangle, and only that area, basically, I think I should have shaded that area in pink. However, just remember that the orange triangle is not of our concern at the moment. The remaining area that is covered within the black triangle is basically representing unissued shares. That's what I've written in pink. I am not very sure if it's visible, but the words written in pink are simply unissued shares, okay? So I repeat, the area that is left in between the orange triangle and the black triangle, that area, the arrow that is representing that area in pink, is basically representing unissued shares, and these unissued shares are basically simply the remaining shares that you are authorized to issue but have not yet issued. That is, the authorized share capital is, for instance, in our example, 5 lakh rupees and 50,000 shares basically. So you have a paid up share capital of 10,000 shares. So the unissued share capital is going to be how much? Simply, how much? I'm going to give you a moment to guess. So the monetary value is going to be 4 lakh rupees, and that is going to represent 40,000 shares. So you have an unissued share capital at the moment. In this picture, in this triangle, you can see that you have an unissued share capital of 40,000 shares, and that is something that you are authorized to issue in the future later on when you feel that your company basically needs to raise more money. And at that point, what you can do is you can issue more shares, and doing so would mean that you're going to expand the area covered by the orange triangle. That is, you're going to increase your paid up share capital, and once you do that, you have to keep in mind that there is a limit to how much paid up share capital, that is how much issued share capital you can increase. Why? Because like I said, the limit is that your authorized share capital represents the maximum amount of shares that your company can issue, right? So the question arises that, for instance, at the moment you have 50,000 shares as authorized share capital, and you have 10,000 shares as paid up share capital. And you know that in the future, as and when the need arises, you can issue more shares, and those shares that you issue in the future can be issued up to a limit of 40,000 shares, because that is the limit, right? So you can't come out of this black triangle, and like I said earlier, the black triangle represents the limits, that is the authorized share capital, the share capital that you have the authority to issue, that is your company has the authority to issue and gain money in return, right? So the question that arises is, can you never ever increase your authorized share capital? What if the company expands to a certain extent and you do need to raise your authorized share capital? So the answer is that yes, definitely you can. However, there is a relevant procedure for that, and the procedure is rather cumbersome, rather difficult. So always remember that instead of choosing that procedure, you always have the option of initially setting an authorized share capital to a higher limit, so that as and when the need arises, you can definitely increase the authorized share capital. And once again, to illustrate this with the help of an example, just remember that, for instance, when starting out, you know that you do definitely will intend to expand later on, or you are pretty sure that your company is going to need more money later on. So just remember that it's a good idea to have a larger amount authorized as share capital. Why? Because, for instance, initially you set it out as, let's say, 10 lakh rupees, or if, for instance, you have bigger plans, you set it out as 1 crore rupees. That does not mean that initially you have to have that amount of cash in your hand when you're starting out. That simply means that that is the limit, that is the maximum number of shares that your company can ever issue. So it's always a good idea to have some sort of figure in mind as to how much authorized share capital you want to set. And like I said, it's always also possible to change this. However, there's a procedure related to it, and it kind of involves getting members' permissions and everything. So just remember that authorized share capital can surely be increased. However, it's better to have a decent amount set as your authorized share capital in the beginning, so that you don't have to increase it very soon after starting the company. One more thing that I would like to add is, simply remember that paid up share capital, for instance, in our example, was 1 lakh rupees. However, if you are absolutely sure, for instance, that you are never going to need promoters or investors from outside, and if the four of you are sure that the amount that you're investing at the moment is going to suffice, then remember you also have the option of buying up all of the shares at the beginning. So for example, in our picture you can see that the authorized share capital is set at 5 lakh, that is 50,000 rupees. So in our example, if for instance you decide that you yourselves are going to be the owners of the company forever and ever, and you're not going to feel the need to get promoters from outside to invest in your company, buy shares from your company, you're not going to feel the need to raise more money, so then remember that you also have the option of issuing shares up to 50,000 rupees. That is, you have the option initially of having a paid up share capital equal to the authorized share capital. In order to do that, all you have to do is simply issue shares up to 50,000 rupees and your paid up share capital is going to be equal to your authorized share capital. And like I said, this option is possible. However, it's not a good idea. Why? Because unless you're absolutely sure that you're not going to need investment or promoters other than yourselves, then remember that having an authorized share capital more than your paid up share capital is always a good idea. If you found this video useful, please press the like button and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in my next video.